I'm Maryelizabeth Yturralde with Creating Conversations Bookstore. We are delighted to be presenting the 20th anniversary event for Men of Mystery. We've been the partner bookstore for Men of Mystery for the majority of those 20 years, and we are so excited to be able to at least have this event with the keynote speakers and the co-chairs in the era of the pandemic. I will be making a few housekeeping notes, and I will be following up with these items in the chat function. So the first thing is just a quick reminder that attendees, by attending our event, you've agreed to our code of conduct. Our event will be a harassment-free experience for everyone, regardless of gender, gender identity or expression, age, sexual orientation, disability, appearance, race, ethnicity, religion, or technology choices. We do not tolerate harassment in any form. And anyone violating the rules of the event, which is basically just don't be a jerk, can be expelled from the event. Before I introduce co-chairs, I just want to remind everyone that there is a discount code that all of you should have received as attendees for purchasing from Creating Conversations, and that is the extremely clever code MOM2020. So without further ado, I would like to welcome you all once again and introduce Jan Wilcox and Cindy Woods, who are the co-chairs of Men of Mystery, which is a volunteer organization that's been bringing together readers, fans, and writers for 20 events now and counting. So welcome, Jan and Cindy.
Thank you, Maryelizabeth. Welcome, everyone. We are excited to do this, even though it is not ideal. We would love to be with you in person, but we're so happy you could join us. Jan, do you want to do your introduction first? Oh, and by the way, we do want to thank you to encourage you to buy books from Creating Conversations. All of these gentlemen have many books, and they're wonderful, all of them. As Maryelizabeth said, the code is MOM, Men of Mystery 2020, which is our year. So thank you so much. Jan?
Hi, thank you very much. I have the great pleasure of introducing Craig Johnson. And if any of you have had a favorite uncle that's near and dear to your heart, makes you smile and laugh every time you see him, you are about to meet another person of that individual quality in Craig Johnson. In addition, Craig happens to be an awesome author. Among his claim to fame is the vastly successful Walt Longmire mystery series and the inspiration for the Longmire series that's been on TV and I guess it's A&M or A&E. And if you really want to get the full experience of the Walt Longmire book and experience something unique, you have got to check out the Longmire Days that happens every year during the summer, although it didn't this year, but hopefully it will next year. And it's a little town it's called Buffalo in the county of Johnson. Let's see, where is that? Johnson County, Wyoming. And thousands, literally thousands of fans come. They flock to that town to be with Craig and with the crew and the staff of all of the series that you could watch. And I encourage you to check out his website, buy his books, and step into the wonderful world of his mystery and Western and Indian folklore. So that's the pitch for Craig. And I'm also going to share with you a little bit about William Kent Krueger. I've been able to attend some of his events as well in person. And I just want to say that he's one of those authors that draw you in immediately when you're listening to him. And it's like opening up one of his books and the first page, you are drawn in, and he just grabs hold of you and transports you to the location of the book that he's sharing. His writing and his smooth voice are truly inspirational, and they give you a great thirst to want to read more of his books. Kent has written more than 20 books and counting, and he is prepared to wow you along with the other two authors. And thank you very much, Kent, for being one of our three speakers as well. Thank you.
I have the pleasure of introducing T. Jefferson Parker. He was one of our two first speakers for Men of Mystery 20 years ago. He interviewed Michael Connelly, and that was a great deal of fun. He also came back for our 10th year. So we're so excited to have him back for our 20th. Many of you probably know him. He's a local author. He's one of ours. And he started out as a cub reporter and covered crime scenes, City Hall, things like that. His first novel, Laguna Heat, got wonderful reviews and then was made into an HBO movie starring Harry Hamlin, Jason Robards, and Rip Torn. His books deal with crime, life, and death in sunny Southern California. And he's won an Edgar Award and also the LA Times Book Prize for mysteries. His last 6 novels all featured LA County Sheriff's Deputy Charlie Hood. And I also have the pleasure of introducing our wonderful narrator, a moderator. If any of you have dialed in for our Collecting Clues events with Creating Conversations, you might have seen Rich. He's quite wonderful. He's spent the last 25 years interviewing and reporting on politicians, athletes, authors, CEOs, celebrities, artists, cops, doers, dreamers all over the country. He's often known as a political commentator and he runs a blog to that effect. So you can imagine he's been quite busy the last few weeks. He's had the pleasure of his blog, The Open Mic, features interviews with all kinds of writers. And we are just thrilled to death to have him with us. So if I may, I'll hand it over to Rich.
Well, hello, everybody. I know while Craig and Jeff and Kent are all getting ready to unmute and join us with video, I'll just tell you to Cindy and Maryelizabeth and Jan, thank you very much, all of you, for having me here again. This was something I really was looking forward to, because for those of us who love words, who love storytelling, who love storytellers, this is I feel like a quarterback who's just made the Super Bowl. I'm gonna get an opportunity to talk with the 3 of the greatest quarterbacks in Super Bowl history. If there's a different analogy I'd use, I'm a sports guy too, so that's the one I'll use in this particular case. Just so everybody knows, I'm going to be asking all of these authors some questions individually about themselves and their work, and then I'm going to throw some things also interspersed throughout to all 3 of them. So without any further ado, let's just go ahead and get this started. And by random selection, my first question is going to be for Jeff. Jeff, how you doing today? I understand we're both in California, so we're the lucky ones. We've got the good weather today.
Yeah,
so
we got the good weather, and I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking.
Great. Well, I wanted to say, start off, congratulations. You're getting great reviews on the new Roland Ford novel, Then She Vanished. And I was looking at a lot of them, and I was intrigued by one in particular that came from the AP, because it said it was less of your usual mystery, and it compared it to an apocalyptic James Bond thriller. Now, given that this is your 26th novel and the fourth in that series, what was your thinking going into that particular book? And do you think that description was apt?
That description surprised me, but I think it is kind of apt. Um, the genesis of that book, or the nudge that got me going on that book, I started writing it, it's been a year and a half, 2 years ago. And at that time, it seemed to me that the mood of the nation was just so dark and divided and angry. Um, all the division that we've been hearing so much about, it was really seemed like it was reaching a peak, then. I mean, you can't even compare it to now. So anyway, in this Roland Ford book, my guy's as a private detective, and he gets involved in politics in this book, up close, some dirty politics, and that allowed me to enter this conversation that we're having as a nation divided, and put my poor sort of forthright, well-meaning PI in the middle of all this hate, and build a story that is kind of dreadful and kind of scary and kind of ominous, and that's the feeling that I want to leave my readers with at the end of that book. I want them to feel unsettled, and I want them to feel like they hope that it won't get that bad.
Well, I will tell you, as someone who's been covering politicians for more than 20 years, ominous is probably a apt description of all things right now for a lot of folks. Um, Kent, let me ask you a question along those same lines, because speaking of comparisons, uh, your book from last year, uh, 2019's This Tender Land, was likened by many people to the legendary Mark Twain's great classic, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Now, I understand that was a little bit by design, but it's also a major departure from the Cork O'Connor series. Um, was this something that you always wanted to do, step away a little bit from pure mysteries and write a big, sweeping epic like this?
Yeah, that's what I started out wanting to do many, many years ago. I just didn't know how to do it then. Um, then I cut my teeth on all of the mysteries in my Cork O'Connor series, and when I finally thought I might be able to handle this story that had been with me for a long time, I decided to give it a shot. But in truth, this is a story I've wanted to write since I was 11 years old. When I was 11 years old, that would have been in the fifth grade. Toward the end of that year, our teacher read to the class The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. She did it by reading half an hour after lunch every day. I love that book. There was this kid, and he was just like me, and he was out there on the Mississippi River having these really great adventures. And of course, after that, I had to read Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which I also dearly loved. So, honest to God, across my whole career as a writer, I have wanted to write a story that would pay homage to Mark Twain. Now, for anybody listening who has no idea what This Tender Land is about, it's set during the Great Depression in the summer of 1932. It's the story of four orphans running from the law because they've committed a terrible crime, but for the right reason. They know if they take to the roads to get away, they'll be caught quickly because a manhunt has been launched to capture them. They're afraid to ride the rails, as everybody was doing back in the Great Depression, because the railroads back then were patrolled by private cops called bulls. And the bulls had a reputation for being incredibly cruel. So the kids are afraid to ride the rails. Instead, they decide to take to the rivers. They canoe a river called the Gilead to the Minnesota River. They canoe the Minnesota to the Mississippi. And their plan is to canoe all the way down to the Mississippi to St. Louis, where they believe they have family and they'll be safe. This is my updated version of Huckleberry Finn.
Yeah, Craig, I'm going to come to you in 1 second, but I want to follow up, Kent, because I know you also have a new Cork O'Connor book coming out next year, and I understand it's a prequel. Maybe can you give us just a little bit of a preview of what that book is going to entail?
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I have often made reference across the course of the 17 books in my series to Cork's background, his father, his mother, important people in his lives who have left the scene. They've died. And I thought, gee, it would be really interesting to give the reader an idea of who these people were that shaped Cork's, his being, his moral fiber. shaped him into the man who occupies center stage in this series. And so I imagined this story that picks up Cork in the year before his father is killed in the line of duty. His father was sheriff of Tamarack County before Cork was. And so it allowed me to explore those important relationships, the relationship Cork had with his father, the relationship he had with his mother, the relationship his parents had. And I got to tell you, I just had a ball writing this particular story.
Well, we're all looking forward to it. Craig, let me come to you because you also have a new Longmire book that came out this year, and it touches on one of the most iconic events in American history, which of course was the Battle of Little Bighorn. I remember going to Little Bighorn as a kid, and the feeling as a history nerd in the fifth or sixth grade, being so impacted by that. But specifically, your story deals with some artwork that claim to depict a realistic scene of the battle. We know that's not really true, but tell us a little bit about that storyline and what inspired you to tackle that particular issue in this, which I believe is it the 20th?
No, it's the 16th.
16th. Okay. Yeah, tell us a little bit about the book, please.
Well, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here, and certainly with Jeff and Kent. It's always fun to be with these guys like that because not only are they remarkable writers, but they're also just absolutely charming individuals. And if you haven't met these guys and you haven't been able to spend time with them, I would advise you to do so because they are both absolutely charming individuals. So it's a wonderful thing to be here. In answer to your question, I don't know. I mean, the painting by Cassilia Adams, at Custer's Last Fight, was described by Norman MacLean, the acclaimed author of A River Runs Through It, as the most viewed by inebriated, questionable art critics than any other piece of artwork in American history. And most people, if they don't know the name of Cassilia Adams, I can just about guarantee that they've seen the painting, simply because it's referred to as the Budweiser painting. It was bought by Augie Bush, and was one of the first national art campaigns, in an attempt to make a somewhat small local brewery by the name of Budweiser into the juggernaut that it is nowadays. And the way they did that was at one point in time, they were sending out about 1 million copies of this particular painting to be put up on saloon and bar walls, and it worked. They became the largest brewery in the world and the painting became a hallmark in American history, where it was seen by just about everybody. Of course, the tantalizing aspect of this is that in a fit of philanthropic zeal, Augie Bush gave the painting to the 7th Cavalry once they were done printing up all of these posters, and it hung on the wall at their headquarters in Fort Bliss, Texas, until 1946, when the commissary burned to the ground and the painting was destroyed. Or was it? The whole idea behind the book is that perhaps the 16.5 by 9.5 foot painting might have survived the fire and then the question becomes, how do you get the sheriff of Absaroka County, the sheriff of the least populated county in the least populated state in America involved? And hopefully I was able to do that.
Well, let me ask, this is a question for all of you. And one of the things that stands out so much about all of your writing is the tremendous sense of place that you bring to your stories. Jeff, Southern California, and San Diego in particular, there's a lot of Southern California set books. We know certainly Michael Conley and Walter Mosley and folks like that. But, of course, with you, it's in San Diego and surrounding areas, Kent and Minnesota, and of course, Craig with rural Wyoming. You really have turned these settings into characters unto themselves. And I really admire it when I read it because I know that it's actually nowhere near as easy as you make it look. So please, Jeff, I'll start with you again since I singled you out first. Talk a little bit about how you do that and you incorporate place into your stories. And do you have any rules or guidelines or anything that you follow with that, or is it more of a gut thing?
I kind of come to my writing about place as from a reader's point of view. as a reader, I love a strong setting, and I don't care where it is. It can be urban, rural, North America, South, anywhere. But as a reader, I really demand a good accounting of where and when this story is going to happen. And I also have always felt as a writer, even back way before I was published, that my surroundings are endlessly fascinating to me. I love where I live, and I love writing about where I live. And I think when you're vested in a place as deeply as I am, Southern California, say, I've married twice and buried many and raised children here, and I am Southern California. It's in my blood, and so it's easy for me to write about. And as I look around me, and I almost always like to write about the town where I live in. I've written in detail about Laguna Beach, Fallbrook, a little bit about LA, San Diego. Where I am is where I find my inspiration. So if I can portray what I see around me in the morning in my little town of Fallbrook, where I'm writing about now, I know that it's going to have the ring of truth because it comes from that. I don't have to do any research. So that's kind of my take on it. I'm very much inspired by where I am, wherever it might be, wherever I'm living. I love.
Kent, is that how you feel too? I mean, I know you're from the West Coast, like us. I mean, and now you're a Minnesota transplant. What's your take on how you incorporate place into your work?
Yeah, just first of all, let me say I'm not, as you point out, native to Minnesota. I didn't move here. I was a gypsy kid. I was actually born in Wyoming, a few miles south of where Craig lives right now. But I was part of a family who was we were really gypsies. We moved around a lot when I was a kid, and I never had anywhere that I really thought of or called home. But I swear to God, the first time I set foot in Minnesota, when we finally moved here when I was about 30 years old, I knew I'd found home. I fell madly in love with this place and with its people. And so every time I sit down to write a story set here, it's kind of a love letter to Minnesota, to this adopted home of mine. And I honestly believe that those of us who are storytellers, at least those of us who are storytellers and write profoundly out of a sense of place, do that because for whatever reason, we have this ability, this capacity to soak up all of the sensual elements of a place and find the words to put them on the page in a way that brings that place to life fully for a reader. One of my inspirations was a great California writer, John Steinbeck. I always loved how beautifully he evoked the area around the Salinas Valley. And so when I write, just as you pointed out, Rich, I write my sense of place as if I am creating character. And all of us know when we're creating characters, the flesh and blood people in our stories have a particular voice. The places we write about have voice.
Yeah.
No, when I write about northern Minnesota, it's the voice of the wind through the pine trees, or the scratch of desiccated leaves in the fall, skittling across the road, or all kinds of things. Characters have a smell to them, whether that's good or bad. And a place has a sense of smell. A place has a personality. A place has a culture to it. And so what I try to do is create my place in the same way I would create any important character. In fact, I think in terms of the way I write, character may be place may be the most important character in my work.
Well, Craig, I'm sure that this all rings very familiar to you. And of course, those who have been to Wyoming know that the overriding things like wind, which is a constant in Wyoming, particularly certain times of the year, etc. The same thing. You also are not a Wyoming native. You came there as an adult, and you have made it home. It's made it you're as associated with Wyoming as anybody around now, as any native. How do you approach that setting and that feeling of place in the Longmire books?
I think my favorite quote about place is actually from the famous newspaper man from Chicago, Studs Terkel, who had that great quote, "Nothing ever happened nowhere." You gotta, it's what it's all about, like that. I mean, and for me, like that, whenever you're writing about, like I said, the least populated county and the least populated state like that, well, what are you left with? Like, you really got to, you really have to kind of advance the idea of place, and I remember I was fortunate enough, like, to have dinner with Tony Hillerman. I had a short story that won an award, like that. And one of the great things was I got to go have dinner with Tony, like that. And I was working on my second book, and I don't know which book he was working on. He was way on down the trail, like that. And I remember asking him. I said, how do you do this? How do you, how do you continue doing this? Making it fresh every single time, like that. And he said, well, to sound like take the risk of sounding like a bad sports analogy, you got to play them up one at a time, like that. But you also need to find some kind of reference, like that, to kind of frame what it is that you're doing. And I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, what's the thing that has the largest scale effect on us as Westerners? And I thought it's got to be the weather, it's got to be the seasons, like it. And so at that point in time, I started doing the books in what I refer to as a Vivaldi, the four seasons. Like it takes me 4 books to get through 1 year of Walt Longmire's life. And anybody who's ever been to Wyoming knows that Wyoming in July is nothing like Wyoming in January. And it appears, as I'm looking out the window right now, like the January's trying to arrive a little bit early. We were talking about the weather earlier, like that, but that's had an effect. And but I think that for me, like that's one of those things. Like the other thing that it did is it kind of gave me an opportunity to kind of slow down Walt's aging. Walt's like 16 books down the road, but if it takes me 4 books to get through each and every one of Walt's years, like Walt's only 4 years older than when we first met him, and so that means at some point in time I'm going to be older than Walt, and I don't know if I like that idea at all. I got to be honest, but yeah, it's it's just one of those things. I think that these guys have described it most aptly, like that. It's an important character in the books, like that. It has a large scale effect on the books, like that. I mean, we can talk about mystery as being kind of plot oriented, like that, and that's the mechanics, like that. But the poetry of the books is always going to be that location. It's always going to be the surroundings, and I'm kind of steeped in the West, I have to admit.
Mhm. Kent, let me ask, this is a question for you specifically, but I want to piggyback on a little something. Craig mentioned Tony Hillerman, who I think all of us would agree, one of my favorite writers ever. I think I've read every word he ever wrote. I can't say it easy, but I read them all. A lot of your books, excuse me, let me go. Well, a lot of your books do deal with Native American culture and Native American spirituality, and I thought of it because, of course, Tony's books all did too. The Leaphorn Cheese series, but that exploration has become a little controversial in recent years. Folks are sometimes, questioning about folks not in a culture writing about that culture. How do you research to write a character, a native character, and were you ever concerned about, not getting the cultural aspects right? I mean, how do you go about doing it and making sure that you feel comfortable that you got it right?
A great question, Rich. But before I answer this, I just have to say this. Craig, I am so envious. One of the great sadnesses of my life is I never had the opportunity to meet Tony Hillerman in person and to tell him how much work has meant to me. Yeah, I'm always terribly aware that when I write a story in my Cork O'Connor series, I am a white guy trespassing on a culture not my own. I actually, Tony Hillerman is in large measure the reason I do what I do now. I tried for so long to write the great American novel, and when I said to hell with that, I want to write something somebody might actually want to read, and looked around me and saw that everybody reads mysteries. So I thought I'm going to write a mystery, and I just happened to be really steeped in Tony Hillerman at that point. I looked around Minnesota and said, nobody's doing that kind of thing with the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe here in Minnesota, so maybe I could do that. When I made that decision, what did I know about the Ojibwe? I knew about as much as most white people know about the native cultures we live shoulder to shoulder with, which was nothing. But I was a cultural anthropology major in college, and so the idea of learning about this culture, not my own, was pretty exciting. And I began in the way all good academics begin. I began by reading. I read everything I could get my hands on about the Ojibwe culture. During the course of my research, I began to meet members of the Ojibwe culture and form relationships that have over time become important friendships for me. Um, Whenever I have finished a manuscript in the series, I try to give it, if my deadlines will allow me, I try to give it to at least one of my Ojibwe friends to read and vet for me, so that I haven't said anything that's particularly stupid or even worse, offensive. Um, so I have always been concerned about exactly the issue that you've referenced here, Rich. This is not my culture. I am trespassing, and so I do everything I can to get the culture right. Now, the response from the Ojibwe community to my work, at least those readers who have contacted me, has been wonderfully gratifying. Here's an example. A while ago, I got an email that went something like this: Dear Mr. Krueger, I am the tribal librarian for the Lance Reservation. That's on the UP of Michigan. When any of our tribal members come into the library and they're not sure what they want to read, I always recommend your work, because for a white guy, you do a pretty good job. So there you go.
I love that. I love that. Jeff, this question I'm going to ask of you directly, because I understand, because noting that your first, Kent, that your first book, or that your first efforts were maybe around writing the great American novel, which I think a lot of writers think that they're going to do. I understand your first book was not, or your first effort to write a book was not a mystery, and that you eventually uh, decided that that wasn't going to be your calling, and then you did turn to the mystery genre. Uh, yeah, I think it's worked out for you. We might be able to agree that it's probably worked out for you. But what turned you toward writing mysteries and away from maybe the great American novel or any other form of writing? What was it? What was the pull for you there?
I'll tell you, it's kind of an interesting story, especially for writers, young, old, beginning, whatever. Shortly out of college, I was an English major in college, and I wanted to write well. And I sat down, and I was working as a waiter at the time, 21 years old, and I spent a couple of years working on I wrote a book, and it was kind of a narrow little book. It was a Bildungsroman. It was a literary attempt, and I wrote it as well as I could. And I had met at a party some years prior a young man who at that time was a hotshot editor in New York at the age of 22 or something, Morgan Entrican. And we met at this party, and I sent him this manuscript. It was called The Bottom Line. It's about a young surfer growing up in Newport Beach who tries to track down his errant father, who was run off with the family fortune and the company's secretary. So I sent this manuscript to Morgan, and he got back to me a couple of weeks later, and he said, Jeff, I can't publish this. Nobody in New York will publish this because nobody in America cares about a young surfer growing up in Newport Beach. But you finish the book. It's not bad. You have a little bit of talent, and you have a lot of durability because you finished the book. And most beginning writers never finish their first book. So his advice to me was, you need to write something more commercial. Go to the New York Times bestseller list on Sunday and read the capsule summaries of each bestseller and what it's about, and see if you can write something like that. So I did that, and I noticed that there was some crime writing and some mysteries on that list. I forget now who it was. I think John D. MacDonald maybe was on there, and a couple of books that I liked. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write a mystery. So I sat down, I wrote a mystery, and it took 5 years, and I wrote it 5 times, and I threw away 2,500 pages of that manuscript until I got it kind of together, and I sold it to St. Martin's Press, and never looked back. And I believe now, as I believed then, that the writing of mysteries and crime thrillers is not necessarily an ugly stepchild to literary writing. I think that there can be high quality work in genre writing, and I think that there can be kind of low quality work in some mainstream fiction. So, I always try to keep my standards high, and I never put my name on something that I'm not proud of.
Well, I would absolutely agree that all three of you do. I mean, you guys, if literary is the standard, you guys all meet all that. Believe me, there's nothing cheap about any of your genre work. Um, Craig, I wanted to follow up a little bit with a question that's specifically for you because, and maybe this is lore and maybe not. So correct me if I don't have the history right. But I understand that when you wrote your first Longmire manuscript, you actually started it and then threw it in a drawer and walked away from it for a long, long time. How close were you to never pulling that manuscript back out of the drawer and finishing it? And what was the thing that actually did get you to go back and have another crack at it and get started?
Yeah, I'll try and give you the Reader's Digest version of this. Like, what happened was I wrote the first couple of chapters of the Cold Dish, and this was years and years and years ago. And so I wrote it like that, and I wrote the first two chapters like that, and I rapidly discovered that one of the main problems was I didn't know enough about rural sheriffing, and so I probably needed to go in and talk to a sheriff like it. And so I did. I drove the 20 miles into Buffalo. The sheriff at that point in time was a fellow by the name of Larry Kirkpatrick, who'd been the sheriff here in Johnson County for a number of years. And I told him, I said, my name's Craig Johnson. I've got a little ranch out near Ucross, and I'm writing this murder mystery about a Wyoming sheriff. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to kind of help me out. And he said, well, I've never done anything like that before. And I said, well, I'm not looking for literary criticism here. I'm looking for, basically the procedural aspects of, how it is that a rural sheriff, would take on a, homicide investigation. And he said, well, all right, I'll try and give it a shot. And so I went home and I was so taken with the idea that I'd solved my problems that I built a ranch. And I don't mean paid somebody to build a ranch. I mean, I built it. I poured the concrete, stacked the logs, and did all that stuff. I had one of those fathers who thought you were slave labor until you escaped, and so I was forced to learn, all of those things and, I learned probably more than I certainly paid any attention to learning like that, but built the ranch, did all of this. My wife had a store that she wanted to open up, and there was an old opera house over in Sheridan, and I went in and tore it all out and rebuilt it, and got a store all up and going, and came back out to the house one day and was searching through the desk in the office and stumbled onto those two lonely little chapters of the Cold Dish, and pulled them, out of the drawer there and looked at them and 10 years had gone by without me even looking at these things. And so I reread them and they were just as bad as I remembered them being 10 years earlier and so I thought, oh well, you're going to have to go in if you're going to try and write this thing you're going to have to go in and reintroduce yourself to this sheriff all over again. I knew he was still the sheriff because I'd voted for him 3 times and so I thought, okay, well, this is going to be embarrassing and I hadn't worked up the nerve to do it. But finally, there was one day I drove into Buffalo, I was putting gas in my truck, and this police cruiser pulls in and parks on the other side of the pump island, and I'm standing there, pumping gas into my truck, and this fella gets out and he starts fueling up his cruiser, and he's looking across the bump island at me, and he's giving me this look that I had seen before. It was one of those looks that said, "What did I arrest you for, and when was it?" And so I stuck out my hand and I said, "Sheriff Kirkpatrick, you're probably not going to remember me." And he goes, "Oh yeah, your name is Craig Johnson. You're the one that's got the little ranch out near Ucross, and you're the one that's writing a murder mystery about a Wyoming sheriff." And I looked at him and this was like a 5-minute conversation from 10 years previous. And I looked at him and I said, "That is absolutely amazing." And he nods his head and he goes, "Yeah, if you don't mind me saying so, this book's going kind of slow." And that pissed me off. It really, it set me off. And I was like, okay, well, by golly, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to finish this book, for no other reason than because, I've become a laughing stock here in the county, for goodness sake. And so I sat down and wrote up the rest of the Cold Dish in about 6 months. And at that point in time, it was actually I made the mistake I think a lot of beginning authors make, where I thought, boy, if I get this published, they're never going to publish another one. So I'm putting everything into it. And so the first draft of The Cold Dish was like about 650 pages long. It was like War and Peace in Absaroka County was what it was like. And so this wonderful agent that I was able to get, Gail Hockman out of New York, looked at it and she said, if I have to deliver this in a wheelbarrow, it's not going to get published. You're going to have to cut this thing down. And so that's where I learned, one of the most valuable lessons, is that not everything has to go in there like that. And also the other being that, you may think you know what this book is about like that, but, until you write it, you don't know what this book is about like that. And then you get that wonderful opportunity of coming to terms with the rewrite. Which is the writer's best friend, like that, where you go back and, whenever Jeff was talking about going through those 5 different rewrites of that first novel, like that, I mean, you really, you go and then you find out, what's the wheat and what's the chaff, like that, and you throw all the bad stuff out and, exemplify like at the important stuff that needs to be in there, like that. And it was a tough row to hoe like that, but I think it was probably the best thing I could have ever done, maybe to set that book aside for about 10 years and then be ready to write it.
Well, let me follow up on that with a question for all of you, because you mentioned genre. Okay, when you write a series and you have at least one main recurring character, maybe multiple recurring characters, how does that impact you in terms of your plot lines? Does it make it any easier to develop plot lines because you don't have to necessarily restart with brand new characters every time? Does it make it more challenging because you have a framework that you feel you need to stay within? How does it impact you when you sit down to write the 5th or 10th or 16th book in a series with a character that people have come to really have absorbed and have welcomed into their literary world? I mean, it would seem like a lot of responsibility. So that's a long-winded question. Kent, this time I'll start with you. How does that affect you to have these recurring characters and how you go about writing your developing plots?
Well, it could handcuff me, but I think all of us who have written long-running series have come up with ways to come up with the key to the handcuffs. This is how I have always approached it. Although Cork O'Connor is at the heart of my stories, it's really the 17 books, now 18, next year I'll have number 18 out. It's really the saga of the Cork O'Connor clan. So Cork doesn't have to carry everything on his shoulders. Certainly Cork is always at the heart of it, but most of the series that I enjoy reading, I like not just because of the main character, but of the cast that surrounds the main character. Jeff, I remember when I read the first Roland Ford that I read by you, one of the things I loved about it were all of the wonderfully eccentric characters that surrounded this guy. And while he was terrific, I just loved that cast of characters. And so if you give, for me, part of the answer is to give my my protagonist a nice supporting cast. I have a major character, adjunct character in my series, Henry Malou. He is an Ojibwe healer. He's 105 years old. I'm currently writing him as 105 years old, who most readers identify, aside from Cork, as their favorite character in the series. And so when I offer these stories to readers, sure, I try to create inventive plots. I try to not cover the same territory I covered the last time, give the reader new twists and new turns if I can. But what I understand is that's not why the reader's coming back. The reader's coming back because they've fallen in love with this cast of characters, because they've fallen in love with Tamarack County, Minnesota, because they enjoy the elements of the Ojibwe culture that I might offer to the reader. Those are the things that bring the reader back. And for me, continuing to explore character development in all of these adjunct characters, continue to offer the reader elements of the Ojibwe culture that I haven't done so before, to give them a broader view of all the beauty that Minnesota has to offer. That keeps it interesting for me as a writer. And I think that's part of what keeps it interesting for readers across the long course of this series.
Jeff, like I said, I'm just going to come to you next. And I was thinking while you said that, uh, I'm not sure what I would want more to have Bert as having my back or Henry standing bearer. I'm not sure there. Um, you've written multiple series. And so when I asked that question, did it change for you at all as you moved on from one series to another? Did that play any part in all of this? You know how you when you're going to write a recurring character and you need to change the setting to some extent. How did that work for you?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question in a lot of ways for all of us, because we have our kind of franchise characters and series and all, and yet we also are tempted all the time by, you know, like William Kent was talking about, writing that novel that's been burning away at you since you were 11. I've written 3 series, and I've just recently published my 26th book. So most of my writing has been standalone. If you want to do the numbers, the electoral votes come in as a standalone. And to answer your question, for me, I think, weirdly enough, I think it's more difficult to begin or continue a series, than it is to write a standalone novel with the handcuffs completely off from the beginning. That's my take on it. And when I wrote my most recent series, Roland Ford's a PI, I've written 4 of them. The first one was 4 years ago, and when I put a lot of I premeditated a lot on that book, because I knew it was going to be a series, and I knew I had to have a big enough shouldered character to move stories along. He needed to have a portfolio. I needed to know what it was, and I needed to know him. And as I wrote, book 2 and book 3 and book 4, and making notes now on the next, I was glad I did my homework, but it always felt like this book is going to be harder than the last one, because I've already told this guy's story up to this point in his life once. Now I'm going to have to recap it and change it again, move it forward. And that's a tall order. I think a well-written series of mysteries, especially, thrillers, looks and is made to look easy. When you read it, you go, oh, it's so easy, just so clean and lean and so clear. How did he do it, kind of deal. And I'm sure my cohorts here would agree that it takes an awful lot of work to make it look easy. And I think that for me, the further I get on in any of the series that I've written, the more difficult they become.
Craig, same question to you, but I also want to point out, of course, you have the additional, I'm not sure if pressure is the right word, or the influence of having the TV series, and maybe people who know Longmire, know Walt Longmire only through the TV series, maybe come to the books secondary. That's an entirely different kind of interaction than just writing, the 5th book in the series. How does all of that impact how you approach, the books as you go on through your iterations?
Well, I have to admit that, like, whenever it was like a book 7 or 8, I think it was, like, before, Warner Brothers came and knocked on the door. And so, one of the dirty little secrets that, I really love, like, it is, Wallace Stegner had a really great quote, on his writing and teaching fiction, where he said, the greatest piece of fiction ever written is the disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based off anyone alive or dead. And what a crock that is. I mean, that's your job, is to go find interesting people, and populate your novels with them like that. And so, it would have been really, really difficult, as wonderful a job as the actors did do, like that, for them to supplant, the friends and family and people I work with and everything, my entire life, as characters in the books. Like it's, the biggest complaint that I had, like whenever the TV show first started, people said, well, what's the biggest complaint you have? And I said, everybody's far too good looking than they are in novels. Like that's, just really, but I really haven't had too many people complain about, especially the female viewers, about Robert Taylor's looks. They seem to, accomplish a way to get over that. Like it seems like after a period of time. To go back to, as far as like writing series like that, I got to float my stick, with the guys here. I have to say that, like, that it's, each one is a new game. Like, at each one is a whole new process. Like, and so, when you jump in there and start in like that, like I said before, like, you think you know what it's about, but maybe you don't. Like that, and that's the joy of writing. Like it is, getting to the point where you're comfortable with that improvisational aspect of each book. I mean, I sit down and I do outlines. I outline the living daylights out of my books like that. But then again, there's always going to be that moment where you realize, yeah, the outline is of no use. I'm out in deep water now, and like that, we're going to have to wait and see what happens with this. The other is the marvelous remarks that Kent made about the ensemble aspects of books. Like it, every time you write a book, in many ways, it's kind of like conducting a choral group in many ways. Like whenever you sit down and you think about what it is that this book is, particular book is going to be about, you're going to have to sit down and you're going to have to think to yourself, okay, who are the voices that I need for this book? Like, and if you've got a good ensemble of characters, you can draw out, and bring, some of those voices to the fore and utilize them. Like there was a book that I did 2 books back that was Land of Wolves, which had an awful lot to do with the Basque community here in the Bighorn Mountains. Like, and I knew, that the deputy Santiago Cesar Vitoria, like that, who's Basque and understands the Basque language, was going to have to be a major component, in that particular book. I also knew that Henry Standing Bear was going to have to be a major component in the newest book, Next to Last Stand, simply because I knew I was going to be on the res, I knew I was going to be up at the battlefield, and I knew that his perspectives, on what had actually happened, as far as the Northern Cheyenne and the Lakota are concerned, it was going to be interesting. Like, and so I knew that they were going to be a major component there. And that's just, just part of the game. Like that, you have to utilize those. I mean, after every book, I get 2 kinds of emails. The first one is, you beat up on Walt too much in the last book. You need to take it easy on him in the next book, which is always very gratifying. Like that they're worried about Walt and want me to be, kind to him. But the other one is there was not enough of my favorite character, insert name here, whether it be, there wasn't enough Henry, there wasn't enough Vic, there wasn't enough Lucian, and that's part of the game. Like that, kind of like moving those characters around in a chessboard and kind of bringing them to the fore, and then also allowing them to kind of like, recede like that to a certain extent, whenever they're not a major component of whatever book it is you happen to be writing.
Hey, Rich, could I throw out a question to my cohorts here?
Please do.
Okay,
Please do.
so I don't know about you guys, but okay, so I've got like 18 books now in the Cork O'Connor series, and I've created this broadcast of characters. And I know some of my writer colleagues have these files that they have created as they've gone along, and with all of the important information on each of the characters they created. Well, I never did that. So sometimes when I'm writing a character, I'm going, oh Christ, how tall is he? What was the color of his hair? How old? In one of my books, I had a major character, the son of Cork, be a year younger than he was in the previous one. So I'm often having to go back and reread some of my stuff to make sure that I know I'm writing these characters as I've created. Do you guys have that problem, or have you come up with a system?
I learned I've been learning that the whole way through, and each book in a series gets harder and harder. The devil's in the details. I'm revising a book right now that you'll love this. It's outside of the series. It's a standalone book. It'll be out later next year or the year after. And the protagonist is a 16-year-old boy who's searching for his missing sister, who's gone missing. And he's kind of on his own. He's kind of a waif. He's borderline homeless. He has almost no money, but he does these occasional jobs for these really shady people in Laguna Beach, and they're sort of taking advantage of this guy. And one of the through lines of the book, is a big fat book too, is how much money does Matt have in his pocket? Because it's very important. He's down to his last 35 cents at one point, and then I have to go back through and I have to see how many days went by and how much he got from this job and how much these people, and he's got a paper route. So he's got $12.50 coming in next week, and I spent revising this book, right? I spent more time trying to determine how many pennies Matt had left in his pocket than I did on the plot. It was driving me crazy. Finally, I talked to my wife. I got to know if I'm ever going to solve this. And I know it's going to come back from the publisher with a bunch of question marks. I was going, oh, yeah, that $1.75. What are you talking about?
Thank God for copy editors.
Oh God, yeah, yeah.
It all worked except for that part, right?
Yeah, the
I've got
book's
a, I've got a
perfect besides that. Yeah.
I've got a couple of of like anally retentive law enforcement officials that I send all my books to
Perfect.
in the rough cut. Let them go through like because they will immediately tell me if I miss anything or I messed something up because they've got that entire world completely encased in their heads.
Yeah.
The other dirty little secret is that um, I got to drive 40 miles to go get a gallon of milk here in Wyoming, and so an awful lot of time in Wyoming is spent in vehicles, and I don't know if you guys are aware, but they have these wonderful things called audio books, and I have those CDs. I've got George Guidell, who does the audio versions of my books, and so I know if I'm circling back around, and I'm going to use a character or plot point or something like that from one of my previous books, I better listen to that book again. Just to make sure that I get those details right. So I ride with George. George is my co-pilot many times.
That's good. That's good.
We're really close to the end of our time here, so I could definitely keep asking you guys questions for hours. I hope you're having as much fun as I am, and if you're not, just tell me you are, and it'll be okay. But I want to ask. What is the feeling? Can you describe the feeling you get when you've been working on a manuscript and you type in the two words, "the end"? Is it exhilaration? Is it relief? Something else? I mean, because you've all been doing this such a long time, I'm sure it's evolved from Laguna Heat and then she vanished, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so yeah, Jeff, let me start with you. What is that feeling you get? Do you even think about it?
It's all of the things you said. It's exhilarating. It's pleasing. You feel like you've crossed the finish line. It's a great feeling. And concurrent with that feeling, or adjacent to it, in my writing life is the true joy that I still derive after all these years in writing what I think is a good sentence. And I think that's what drags me through a book from one page to the page 500 is that little joy that comes when you've done something, you've created something that wasn't there before, and and it was good, and so that when young people or writers of any kind age say, how do you stay in there and gut it out through all the hard hours that it takes to write a novel, let alone 25 straight of them. And my answer is always that there is something that should be fun about what we do, and I don't mean fun all the time, and I don't mean fun every minute, but I mean there should be some pride and some absolute joy in cracking off a good line or a good paragraph or a good chapter or a good book. And when you write the end and you feel that you've done a good job, it's wonderful. I just want to jump up and down.
Yeah, guys, and if you could quick, because I know they're gonna come for my head if I don't wrap this up quick.
I'll be real quick. I have never written the end at the end of one of my honestly, I never have. Nor have I ever felt like it was the end. Because you finish the first draft and then you got to go back and revise it, and you send it to your agent and it comes back to you, and you revise it. It goes to your editor and it comes back, and you revise it. And it goes to the copy editor, it comes back, and you revise it. And I don't know about you guys, by the time I have looked at that manuscript and revised it 8 or 10 times, I am sick of it. And the next moment of pleasure comes when my editor finally writes to me and says, you got a great review from the New York Times. Oh, thank you. I guess I did a good job,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, for me, it's like one of those things where, I mean, I definitely think that Jeff's right. I mean, there's always going to be that sense of triumph, I mean, it's a year-long piece of work. It's like mountain climbing. I mean, you finally get there to the top like that. And, there's a real sense of accomplishment that goes along with it. But also there's a little bit of sadness, I think, that goes along with it too. Like that. I mean, whenever you get those wonderful, emails or, notes from people when they say, I start slowing down when I start getting towards the end of your books, because I know, it's going to be another year, before I'm going to get another one. And I find myself, kind of slowing down, whenever I get towards the end of a book. And it's not like I don't know, that these characters are going to be back, and that these adventures are going to continue. But for this particular window of opportunity, for this particular moment in those characters' lives, it's coming to a close like that. And that always is a little bit of a bittersweet for me, I have to admit.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Well, I will say the same thing. This is we're coming to a close, and it's a little bittersweet for me. I have truly enjoyed speaking with all three of you. I'm sure that the audience has as well. I need to hand this back now to Cindy and Jan. I will say before I do, thank you very much.
you,
It's
Rich.
fabulous.
Thank you.
If all of us would be so kind as to mute our microphones, but please leave your video on, and then we'll let Cindy and Jan take over from here.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, gentlemen. That was really fun and wonderful. I hope all our attendees had such a good time. I just wanted to thank everyone again for coming, and for our wonderful panelists and Rich for being here. I do also want to remind everyone that please do support Creating Conversations. The code again, if you missed it, is MOM 2020. And we hope that you will be able to join us next year when we're back to doing live events. Jan?
Yes, thank you. And also in regard to the coming events, it's November the 6th, 2021, and it will be at the Grand in Long Beach. And we're going to have these wonderful three guys again. Yay!